The years following their wedding in Fort Laramie passed like seasons on the high plains, swift, beautiful, and sometimes cruel. Jack and Alara's hidden valley became a true home. The old trapper's cabin expanded with new logs, a corral built for horses, a garden that yielded corn, beans, and squash under Alara's careful hand. Their son, named River for the stream where fate had first bound them, grew strong and wild-haired, learning to ride before he could read, to track deer with his mother's silent step and rope calves with his father's steady loop. By 1880, a daughter arrived, Sage, with her mother's piercing green eyes and a laugh that echoed through the pines like birdsong. Life was hard but rich, filled with the smell of pine smoke, fresh bread baking in a Dutch oven, and the quiet joy of nights spent tangled together under quilts Alara had sewn from traded cloth and deerskin. Jack often marveled at how completely the wild girl had claimed him, not just that first night with vines and rope, but every day since, deeper and surer than any brand on cattle. Yet the frontier never truly granted peace to those who sought it. Word of their valley spread slowly, carried by trappers, prospectors, and Mormon wagon trains pushing west. Some came seeking only water and rest, most left with stories of the beautiful half-Shoshone woman who could outshoot and outride any man, and the quiet cowboy who never let anyone linger too long near his family. But in the spring of 1883, a different kind of visitor arrived, a land surveyor named Elias Croft, backed by the Union Pacific Railroad and a federal grant. Croft rode in with 3 armed assistants, maps rolled under their arms, claiming the government had opened the valley for homesteading and mineral rights. Jack met them at the edge of his corral, Winchester cradled easy in his arms, River and Sage peeking from behind their mother's skirts. Alara stood beside him, bow unstrung but within reach, her face calm as still water over deep rage. Croft was polite at first, offering papers stamped with official seals, explaining that, unimproved, land belonged to those who filed proper claim. Jack's improvements, cabin, fences, irrigated garden, meant nothing without recorded deed. The surveyor gave them 30 days to vacate or buy the land at prices no small rancher could afford. That night, after the children slept, Jack and Alara sat by the fire, the weight of loss pressing heavy. "We fight," Alara said simply, her voice steel. Jack nodded, knowing fight they would, but against lawyers, railroads, and the tide of progress rolling over the west like a dust storm. They rode to Cheyenne, leaving the children with an old Shoshone friend of Alara's mother. In town, saloons buzzed with talk of land booms, cattle barons, and Indian reservations shrinking like snow in summer. Jack sought out a lawyer recommended by a fellow rancher, a weary man named Harlan, no relation, who'd seen too many smallholders crushed. The lawyer studied their story, shook his head at the lack of deed, but suggested a slim chance. If they could prove continuous occupation and improvement prior to the survey, a homestead claim might hold. It would mean court, money they barely had, and time away from the ranch. Worse, Croft's men began harassing the valley in their absence, cutting fences, scattering cattle, poisoning the upper spring. River, only 8, rode out one dawn to find 20 head drowned and bloated. He returned silent, eyes older than his years. Alara's grief turned to fury. She vanished into the hills for 3 days, returning with blood on her moccasins and word that 2 of Croft's men would not trouble them again. Jack did not ask details. He only held her as she shook, whispering that they would not lose their home, not while breath remained in him. The fight dragged through summer courts and autumn delays. Jack sold half his herd to pay legal fees, Alara traded furs and herbal medicines to Cheyenne doctors. They rode back and forth on trails growing muddy with early snow, sleeping in cheap boarding houses that smelled of coal oil and despair. In those stolen nights, far from their valley, their love burned fiercer than ever, bodies seeking comfort against the world's cruelty, whispered promises that whatever came, they belonged to each other. One stormy evening in a tiny room above a livery stable, Alara pressed her forehead to Jack's and confessed her deepest fear, that the white man's law would name her savage, unfit, and take not just the land but their children. Jack kissed the tears from her cheeks and swore on every star he'd ever seen that no paper, no judge, no railroad would sever their family. The next morning he wired an old friend from his trail driving days, now a U.S. Marshal in Denver, asking for any leverage against Croft's backers. Weeks later, a thick envelope arrived, evidence that Elias Croft had forged earlier surveys in Colorado, bribed officials, and claimed land already occupied by Mexican grant holders. It was enough, barely, to turn the tide. Winter gripped the territory when the final hearing came. Jack and Alara stood before a federal judge in Cheyenne's new brick courthouse, she in a calico dress that felt foreign against her skin, he in his one clean shirt stiff with starch. Witnesses spoke. Neighbors who'd traded with them for years, a priest who'd baptized Sage, even the marshal with his damning documents. Croft's lawyers painted Alara as a squatter with no rights, but when she took the stand, speaking clear and proud of the cabin her father built, the garden she'd coaxed from stone, the children born under that roof, the room grew quiet. The judge, an old veteran of the Plains Wars, looked at her long, then at Jack's steady gaze, and ruled in their favor. The valley was theirs, homestead patented, mineral rights waived by the railroad under threat of scandal. Outside in the snow, Alara wept openly for the first time since childhood, and Jack held her so tightly his arms ached, snowflakes melting on their lashes as they kissed like the first time under that long-ago moon. But victory carried cost. The herd was halved, savings gone, and enemies made. Croft vanished, rumored to have fled east, yet whispers persisted of hired guns seeking revenge. Spring brought new threats. Cheyenne and Arapaho warriors, pushed from traditional hunting grounds by reservations and broken treaties, raided outlying ranches. One dawn, smoke rose on the horizon, neighbors burned out. Jack and Alara